Hello everybody, Vince Venturella here. Just wanted to do a video about a few things that have been on my mind lately. Specifically, I wanted to talk about three things: Legos, the Ikea Effect, and Ninth Edition Warhammer. That's right. So what do these three things have to do with each other, and what the heck is what do I mean by the Ikea Effect? So here's what I want to talk about. We all know that there's a lot of change coming, and part of the fears of the next edition of Warhammer have revolved around the idea that certain armies might not be supported anymore. That effectively the Games Workshop might end their continued development and support of that army. Okay, I think we've all heard those rumors, and I don't want to belabor it. You know what they are. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. One week they are, maybe they'll come back in a different way. Who knows? If you want to learn more about that, the internet's out there. What I'm more interested in is the question of why are we upset about it? And I guess on the surface that might seem obvious, but I'm not sure it is. So that's what I want to talk about today. If Games Workshop were to continue the support of your army, or discontinue the support of your army, either way, why do you care? What does it matter? And there's a lot of different potential answers I can think of. The most immediate that come to mind is, well, my army might not be competitive anymore in a new meta that would evolve in the new edition. Or, you know, I spent a lot of money on them, and hence, if I can't play them, then that's a wasted investment. And I think that's all fair and true, but I think there's more to it than that. And I just kind of wanted to take some time and walk through this and kind of explore some things that have been on my mind recently in regards to this topic. So let's talk about, let's start off with the Ikea Effect. So what is the Ikea Effect? The Ikea Effect is what makes Warhammer successful. Basically, it's this. We'll start in the 1950s. In the 1950s, instant cake mix was introduced, and it failed pretty miserably. And it failed because it contained everything you needed to make a cake. You literally could just basically put it, I think you added water, and that was it, and cake came out the other side. Upon researching it, a lot of the feedback that the company that made it got was that there was no more effort to it. There was no work. The men, and mainly women, sadly, we are talking about the 1950s. It's not a sexist comment, just what it is. Felt that there was no actual effort to it. It somehow diminished the value of making the cake. So the producers of this instant cake mix took out the eggs and milk, powdered milk or whatever it was, and made you add those ingredients separately. So there were still some instructions you had to follow. Why am I talking about instant cake mix? I'm talking about instant cake mix because it has to do with this game we play, Warhammer. You can probably see this little guy hanging in the edge of the thing. This little game, Warhammer. The model doesn't come like this, right? This is a Fire Phoenix that I'm doing for a commission piece. And what do we do when we get a Warhammer fig? You have to open the box, you take them out, you've got to clip them, shave them, get them into a good condition, then you got to glue them, then you got to prime them, paint them, arrange them. Maybe you do a movement tray for them. You got to theme it to the whole army. There's a lot of work there. And that work creates a personal sense of investment and ownership that makes us value it higher than you would otherwise. So I'm going to link a paper down below written by a couple people, but most notably to me, Dan O'Reilly. I'm apologizing if I'm pronouncing his name wrong, but he's a behavioral economist. I really like his work. And in that paper, they explore the Ikea Effect, the idea that by having some amount of constructing it yourself or building it yourself, you then value it higher than market norms. It's called the Ikea Effect because obviously Ikea makes you build your own furniture. You don't just get a couch or something or a table. You just get pieces and you've got to put it together. And the trick with that is that people tend to then value it higher. The experiment that's most notable in the paper is they did a nice experiment with Lego figures. And there couldn't be anything more simple in the world. They were something like 8 to 12 part Lego men, and the people assembled them. And then there was like bidding on them to sort of gauge the value of how people valued them. And people valued the Lego figures they had assembled more than the identical Lego figure that was already pre-assembled or assembled by someone else. Now, in the end, of course, there is no difference, right? In this case, it's not even like Warhammer where you could put your own touch on it through modeling, converting, painting, basing, whatever. We're literally talking about a set of identical Lego figures. And yet still, the Ikea effect happened. People valued those tiny little Lego men more when they themselves had put them together. So when we put something like this together, it creates value for us. It creates investment. It's what's made Games Workshop very successful. As a corollary to that story, if anyone's familiar with the story of Rackham Miniatures, Rackham made a series of beautiful miniatures several years back. They were very successful. And they were much like you would expect out of Games Workshop or anybody else. And they sort of misread market trends and started making all their miniatures come pre-assembled and pre-painted. And they failed, and the company went under. Now, there's a lot more to it than that very simplified story. So I'm really, really, really brushing over a lot of details. But that was certainly a major contributor to their failing business. When they took out the Ikea effect, people wanted the miniatures less. They couldn't personalize them, paint them, convert them, do what they wanted with those figs. They took the work out of it. Which is funny to me because one of the things that people often cite this as an impediment to the hobby. I have to get my army painted. I have to do this. When in fact, it's one of the major things that aids retention and interest. Even if you're not that interested in hobbying, that's the key. Go back to the Lego figures. These people had these were random people. They had no great interest in Legos, but they still valued them higher. So it is with this. Even if you're a pretty bad painter and you're okay at gluing figs together, the reality is it's still yours and it's your work. And in the end, you're going to invest part of yourself into it through the work and value it higher than maybe you otherwise would. So that's one of the reasons that I think underpins why it's easy to get upset. Because when a change like this happens, when an army is threatened to be the loss of support, it's not just the army that's being attacked. It's you, to some degree, that is no longer getting supported on a very real, emotional, psychological level. Let me provide you with an example. Most of you probably have a toaster in your house. Depending on how old that toaster is, mine is very old, I don't think they still make my toaster. They have discontinued my toaster. I'm guessing, just based on its age. I don't care. I'll just go get a different toaster if that one breaks. I'm not going to be sad that that toaster isn't still available, isn't being supported. There's no investment. I don't care. It's irrelevant. It either does the job or it doesn't. Now let's move up a step. Let's talk about your car. If you have a model of car you particularly like, I've driven one model of car since I was 17. Okay, if you have one model of car you really like, and it gets discontinued, there you might care some. Are you upset enough to go on message boards or make videos on YouTube? Yeah, maybe. Because sometimes cars, even though we don't build them, can still define us personally. We care for them when they're our biggest sort of purchase outside of a home. And so we invest some of ourselves into them. So maybe we care a little. But the reality is I still would care more about my Warhammer figures in the end emotionally, and them not being useful or something, than my car. Because even though the price of the car is much higher, I hope, I still just don't have that investment I did because I didn't spend hours laboring over the car, building it from scratch, converting it, and making it sort of be an expression of my personality. And like I said, even if you're not a great painter or a hobby or whatever, that can still be true for you. Okay? So it's not just price. It's not just I paid a lot of money. It's not just that. And it's not just that that thing is useful to you. That's true if you can't play that army you love anymore. That's unfortunate. I can't use my toaster anymore if it breaks, but I don't care. I can just get a new toaster. If your army doesn't work, you could just go get a new army. The price of a lot of home appliances, you could probably get an army cheaper than you can get some toasters or other kitchen stuff, but a little facetious, but you get the idea. But that doesn't matter. The fact that there's a new one available to utilize as a replacement doesn't fill the void that having that old thing taken away from you created. And by the way, I'm not saying they're taking away armies. I'm just saying, why do I think it bothers? Well, I'm exploring why I think it bothers us so much. And to sort of add to that point, let me go ahead and tell another story about that Lego experiment. Let's go back to Legos. A secondary experiment they did with the Legos was they had people sit down and say, we will pay you something like a quarter or 50 cents, whatever, for every Lego figure you assemble. But know that when you're done, then they put that when you're done assembling it, we're going to put it in a box, and later on today, we'll disassemble it, and the next person we run this experiment for, they're going to put together the same figures. Okay. So there's the sort of tacit acknowledgement that anything I build is going to be disassembled, broken, destroyed. My work will be undone. Okay? And people built X number of figures, whatever on average it boils down to. It's not really relevant. It's only relevant in comparison. They then ran the experiment again, but instead of putting them aside in a box and saying we're going to disassemble these figures later, they said, we're going to disassemble these figures in front of you as soon as you're done. So the person would put together the little Lego man, again, 8 to 12 piece Lego man. We are not talking about a massive building here. This is plug in an arm, put on a head, put on a hair, whatever. Very simple. And then the person who was running the experiment would right in front of them take it back apart into its component pieces and set those pieces to the side. And what they found was, in the second experiment, people put together less Legos. Even though they were being paid the same money, right? And had the same thing effectively happening. In the end, those were going to be disassembled. They both knew it. The difference was one saw it. Okay? Why am I bringing up this experiment? Because I think this mimics something else that has made this transition, or these rumors especially hard for a lot of people. The reality of the situation with some Warhammer armies is that they have been dead for a while. Let's assume all the rumors are true, and let's assume that armies that, like Bretonnians or Beastmen, are not going to get their own book going forward in some way. What that means is that Bretonnians have been dead since 6th edition. Right? They didn't get anything in 7th, they got 0. They got 0 in 8th, they will get 0 in 9th. They have been dead for 2 editions. They will be as supported in 9th as they were in 8th. Same for Beastmen. Okay? But we didn't see them disassemble the Lego figures in front of us. There was always hope. There was always hope that there's going to be something on the horizon, something coming out. Even if your army isn't actively supported, if you're, say, Wood Elves for the first several years of 8th edition, you still have hope and believe. Maybe there are rumors they'll squat your army. There were rumors Wood Elves were going to get squatted throughout 8th edition. But you still believe and have hope that that's not the case. And in the case of Wood Elves, it turned out to be true. That is to say, the rumors were false. They did not get squatted. They did get updated. Whereas in the case of Bretonnians, it was false. They never did get a book. Right? And maybe 6th edition is their final edition. 11 years ago. All right. What's different is that we know that's the case. They took the Lego figures apart in front of us, instead of telling us these will be disassembled, because that's always true. All of your armies have a limited lifespan. Everyone. This game will not go forever in its current form. If you buy an army, it has a lifespan. Either your own if you meet an unfortunate accident, or the game when it eventually changes. Period. If you go back far enough, all of this stuff, very few people are using things from the 80s anymore because the dragon unit champions for high elves, and the dark elves riding spiders, and the 100 other examples. The 3rd edition Empire book had Sigmar as a special character. I don't think he's still fieldable. Okay? So all of these things have some kind of lifespan. It's Fight Club. On a long enough timeline, the chance for survival of any army drops to 0. And we know that tacitly. But that's okay. It's not what we just want to believe will keep going. It's the human condition, right? Hope springs eternal. So to me, those two things put together, the IKEA effect creates the sort of emotional investment in these things. It makes us love them. We see ourselves as our army, and I don't mean that in any kind of goofy New Age way. I just mean you've put a lot of time and effort and hours into it. You have an emotional and psychological investment, which is fair. You should. And beyond even the money, because I really think you spent the money's gone. Yeah, you miss it in a sort of like whatever fashion, but you have a thing for it. Maybe even a thing you could turn back into cash. Maybe even an amount of money close to what you paid, depending on how you bought it originally, if you bought it secondhand originally. Sustainable Center is very famous in one of his recent videos for saying, like, he does this partially on the side, and he doesn't have an army he doesn't think he could get 90 or 95% value out of. But it still stings, so it's clearly not just the cash. The cash is gone. You didn't have it. It's gone years. Months, years back, behind you. So there has to be more to it. And I think that's what it is. And I think that when you combine that with the idea that we might be being told that some of these things aren't supported, it's taking the Lego figures apart in front of us. And that's what hurts. So my closing thoughts. You might think, well, so what, Vince? That's a neat thing you've told us. Well, I hope that it sort of makes you think about why you care about your army and stuff like that. I hope you found it interesting. But deeper than that, what I also want to point to is the idea that what's real about the IKEA effect is that you did do that work. And it is an accomplishment. And those models you built and painted and hobbied is a real accomplishment that you earned. And regardless of what the company does with the future support of that army, they cannot take that effort and that work away from you. And it is something that you should use as a bastion in sort of these, in times where things are uncertain, to realize if they don't support it, so what? That doesn't matter. I did this, and I'm proud that I put together this army, that I painted this army, that I collected these things, that I had all the games I had, that they were good times, and that I enjoyed everything so much. Rules will change, figs will change, new kits will come out. All of that is ephemeral. But what's not is the fact that you built something, you did something, you earned something, and you had fun doing it. And that, to me, seems to be the thing that you should be taking from that experience and holding on to and valuing, even through times of sort of great change like edition changeovers, which are always going to happen. What won't change is the fact that you built that thing and you earned that feeling of positivity, of sort of a positive psychological utility by completing your work and by making your army and getting them on the table. So that's my thoughts on it. Maybe you disagree, and if you do, that's just fine. Leave it in the comments below. Please like and subscribe if you do, and see you next time. Have a good one.